Let's do it again, folks. The LA Dodgers had the best regular season in their team's history, but only one October win to show for it. The Dodgers are the cream of the crop, but they need to start winning some games in October to seal their legacy as one of the great teams of all time. Jeff Snider of Locked On Dodgers here to talk about it. We're doing Locked On MLB.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball, yes, even during the off season. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. You don't believe me? There's my lower third. Please call me Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who has been a baseball podcaster for the last decade, last 4 seasons as a host here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And you can follow the show at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and on Instagram. You can follow me personally at Locked On MLB, at Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. It's late. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On MLB. Or check out some of the other great shows of the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's pick one totally at random. Locked On Dodgers with Jeff Snider. Hey, by a supreme coincidence, I could do some more setup and everything like that. But you know what? I'm going to bring the man on. He's sitting in front of his bobbleheads. He's been a guest of mine for probably all 4 years I've been here. Jeff Snider, the host of Locked On Dodgers. Which season is this of yours of doing Locked On? Are you a 4th-seasoner as well?
Yeah. We started the same time you did. I believe March 20-something, 2019.
2019, yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
right.
Vince and I have been doing Locked On Dodgers. Haven't missed a day, Monday through Friday, at least 5 episodes a week, every single week for the last almost 4 years.
Yeah, you were one of the first ones. The first one was Stacy's, because I knew Stacy, and she recommended Stacy Gatsoulias of Locked On Yankees. She recommended me to do the Locked On MLB gig, and I started listening to you, and I started listening to Sean Sears at Locked On Cubs, and Stacy, and I think Gabby Starr was doing Locked On Red Sox at the time. There's been some turnover, but there's been consistency, and you've been a stalwart. You've been the Clayton Kershaw of the Locked On Podcast Network in terms of Dodgerdom. And so, let's see. Let's make it 5. Let's make it 5 this year, shall we?
Yeah, might as well, And I think I'm on 1-year deals at this point in my career, like Kershaw is. And I did briefly consider moving to Texas a while back, and so this was 15 years or so ago because my in-laws were there. But yeah, other than that, there's not much that Kershaw and I have in common, except that we don't grow very good facial hair, but we try anyway.
And you're loaded your bobbleheads and figurines behind you. Any new members of their family behind you there?
There's a couple that haven't even gotten up on the wall yet. A couple redheaded pitchers, Dustin May and Justin Turner from his pitching appearance. Former Dodger Justin Turner.
I know.
Yeah, those ones haven't gotten up on the shelves yet. I've got a couple others. Elton John is still sitting in a box somewhere. And I'm one of my goals this offseason is to get this office organized, including getting all my bobbleheads up.
Okay, well, let's just you inadvertently ticked one box I wanted to talk about.
Nothing is inadvertent, Sully. Nothing.
That's true. Justin Turner, World Series hero who showed up positive, tested during the clincher and went on the field without a mask. But a huge part of the Dodgers winning the World Series in the 2020 truncated season. Beloved Dodger is now signed with the Red Sox. So tell me, when the Dodgers sign Rafael Devers next year, how's he going to fit in with the team? I mean, just let's get down to brass tacks here.
He knows He knows Mookie Betts pretty well. If JD Martinez comes back for a second year, I think Devers will fit right in. He'll feel comfortable, and I think he'll do pretty well at Dodger Stadium. So I'm looking forward to it. And I know he's looking forward to being teammates with Shohei Ohtani too. So that'll be a good
It's
time
true.
for him.
You guys had Kimbrel for a while there.
Yeah, that
Um,
sounds
and
familiar. I think
Kimbrel. Now you signed JD Martinez, Mookie Betts, Joe Kelly. You just are
David
acquiring the
Price.
28. There are more. Yeah, David Price. That's right. There are more members of the 2018 Red Sox on the Dodgers than there are on the Red Sox at this point.
Well,
I,
the Red Sox now have Justin Turner, Kike Hernandez, Alex Verdugo, Kenley Jansen, and Chris Martin, all of whom have played for the Dodgers in the last couple of years. So, yeah, they
so
appear to just be doing a swap,
it's the LA Red Sox and the Boston Dodgers. Let's just call it what it is.
which is why you and
Um,
I get along so well. You're
that's
a,
true.
a recovering Red Sox fan living in LA.
That's
I'm
true.
a Dodger fan who's heard of the Red Sox. There it's all you
Yeah,
need.
yeah, I mean, I have to just say I really like the signing of JD Martinez. I don't understand, and again, it's a very good signing for Los Angeles, especially reuniting JD Martinez with his former hitting coach and his former teammate Mookie Betts, and eventually Devers. Who are we kidding? But it's I find it strange. It's a 1 year deal, which is probably the right kind of deal for him. He was an all-star last year. Don't know how many more years you're going to get with him. I'm stunned that some teams that have, uh, could have acquired a good solid bat like that without it breaking the bank, that needed that to boost their team. Cleveland comes to mind. Baltimore comes to mind. you know, Tampa comes to mind. Some of the teams that may have gone for us more safe, the high ceiling, low risk signing like JD Martinez. Instead, he goes to LA. I think it's a great move for LA just because he's the kind of hitter. His hitting IQ is off the charts, and you need to have a player like that. It's like having a second hitting coach. And you saw what he did in Detroit, in Arizona, and Boston. That he's the type of hitter that kind of like the high tide raising all the boats around him. I think that you're going to see when you put him in a lineup with the likes of Betts, with the likes of Freddie Freeman. I think you're going to see a lot of runs scored in LA.
Yeah, and if you believe Scott Boris's version of the story, they turned down bigger offers elsewhere because he wanted to come to the Dodgers. That is that Mookie Betts, Robert Von Scoyoc connection that he wanted
Hmm.
to come to LA and kind of prove himself, improve himself, make a statement, and then get a bigger contract next year. Obviously, some of that is spin. If you're an agent whose client takes what seems like a smaller deal than he might have gotten in this crazy free agent atmosphere, obviously you're going to spin it as, well, he could have had more somewhere else, but we chose this. This is what we wanted. But also, I mean, I think he probably could have had more somewhere else. Just looking at how much Josh Bell, what he got. JD Martinez is a better hitter than Josh Bell, and the fact that Josh Bell puts on a glove sometimes, he doesn't use it well, and so
No,
like there's I don't think there's a universe. I know Josh Bell's a switch hitter, I guess, but I don't think there's any universe where Josh Bell is more valuable than JD Martinez at this point, and yet he got quite a bit more money. So I assume that Martinez could have got more, but he did want to come to the Dodgers for whatever reason, and
well,
I'm not complaining.
Joey Gallo got more than JD Martinez. I mean, look at
Did
I know
Gallo not
Joey
have
Gallo
a good year last year?
had a disastrous year. And yes, I know he had a cameo with the Dodgers by the end, but I mean, it just was disastrous. And yes, I know that Gallo is a fine defensive left fielder, but I mean, I don't know. I just adore what you get from Martinez's bat. Even if he's not going to hit 25, 30 homers, he's going to get a ton of doubles in the gap. And I think LA fans are going to love him right
Yeah,
there.
the only downside of the JD Martinez signing is that it meant there wasn't room for Justin Turner on the roster anymore. That's the only
Okay, well,
downside.
yeah, but I mean, that's look at JD Martinez is just making a bet on himself that he can, uh, have a terrific season, probably be part of another team that will go deep hopefully for the Dodgers, go deep in the postseason. and I think it's a safe bet that he's going to come out on the good side. And if you're going to
Yeah.
make any bets, go to Bet Online. Bet Online remains your number one spot for all your online betting needs. Now, you can get all the latest odds, trends from every professional and amateur league out there, from pro basketball, pro football, college basketball, college football with the bowl seasons coming up. And you have the NHL, and eventually you're going to have the Final Four and March Madness. You got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. That's the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. We're here with, let's get rid of that. We're here with Jeff Snider, the Snide Dog, host of Locked On Dodgers. Now, Justin Turner skedaddled. So did the other Turner, Trey Turner. I got to be honest with you. I'm a little bit surprised that the Dodgers look at. We had a feeling that they knew Corey Seager. I almost said Corey Snider from the former Cleveland Slugger. We had a feeling that Corey Seager was going to test the free agent waters a few years ago when Trey Turner came over in the Max Scherzer deal. I really thought Turner was going to be the long-term solution at shortstop. I'm a little surprised they didn't make a bigger scene to keep him, as he's now gone to Philadelphia, where I think he's going to be an absolutely perfect fit in Philadelphia. But why didn't am I missing something? You follow the Dodgers closer than me. Am I missing something? Why the LA Dodgers let Trey Turner walk?
For me, I feel like almost Trey Turner was more of a foregone conclusion to leave than Corey Seager was. In hindsight, I think Corey Seager is a Southern boy who wanted to be. I don't think LA itself fit Corey Seager that well. I think he prefers the pace of life in Texas. And Trey Turner, it's kind of a similar situation. I think as much as he denied it or backtracked it or whatever, I think he wanted to be on the East Coast. He wanted, his wife is from near Philadelphia, and so it's kind of going home for her. He likes spring training in Florida, where he's from, and just all those things combine. And then you throw in the fact that there's no way he was ever going to get as long a contract as he got from the Phillies. He wasn't going to get that from the Dodgers. He definitely could have gotten more money per year from the Dodgers. I am absolutely positive of that. But overall money, because the Phillies were willing to spread it out over 854 years, I think it was, they could give him
years.
They could give him more overall money. And when you're Trey Turner's age, he's 30 years old, whatever he is, it's it's his only big shot at free agency anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so really you're looking at that overall number more than the number per year. The Dodgers could have given him 6 years at 35 million a year, but at age 36 hitting free agency again, is he going to make up that other, $120 million or whatever that he'd be leaving on the table? I guess not 120, but close to $100 million that he would have been leaving on the table. I don't think he's going to get $100 million contract at age 36. And so for me, I think the answer to your question is it takes two to tango, and Trey Turner didn't want to be a Dodger anymore. And maybe if the Dodgers had matched the offer the Phillies made, Trey Turner still goes to the Phillies. I think the Dodgers would have had to beat the offer the Phillies made, and that just wasn't going to happen. That's not how the Dodgers do free agency.
Well, look, this is why I have you on, because it totally bewildered me. I mean, I like Trey Turner a lot as a player.
Yeah.
I see the Dodgers as a team with very deep pockets who saw a lot of dollars come off the payroll. And I just figured, all right, this is a guy you'd want to keep on this team. So now, and of course, there's this wonderful shortstop class out there. Turner goes elsewhere. Correa, Bogarts, Dansby, Swanson, they all find other homes. Um, what's the plan at shortstop? Are we going for a youth here, or are they going to try to make a deal? What is the plan to, we saw what the plan to make up for Seager was insert Turner. Now Turner's gone. So what's the plan to supplant Turner?
Yeah, my best guess is the Dodgers are still hoping to swing a trade, whether it's Willie Adames from the Brewers or something. But I also think the Dodgers are perfectly comfortable with Gavin Lux as their starting shortstop. Lux was a shortstop in the minor leagues. He was the minor league player of the year in 2019 as a shortstop. He had some defensive issues in 2018, but he mostly overcame those in 2019. And I think Gavin Lux, I think the Dodgers are pretty darn comfortable with him as their starting shortstop, at least to start the season. And then they can play it by ear and see, okay, if it's not working, well, then maybe the Brewers have fallen out of contention and they're more willing to trade Willie Adames, or some other team has a shortstop that's available, Tim Anderson from the White Sox, somebody at midseason, maybe their chances are a little bit better of swinging a trade there. But yeah, I think right now, well, yeah, if the season started tomorrow, it would be Gavin Lux. And I think the Dodgers, it may not be their ideal situation, but I think they're pretty comfortable with that idea. Lux was, until his neck injury late in the season last year, Lux was very, very good last year. He hit really well, didn't have a ton of power, but even without that, he had a solid, mid 800s OPS. And, he was a very good hitter last year before the neck injury kind of derailed his last month of the season. And so if they could get, Gavin Lux before the injury had a better OPS than Trey Turner had last year. And so if they could get that offensive production, even if he's not everything they're looking for defensively, he's extremely athletic. Range isn't going to be an issue. It's mostly the arm is the question. But I think if they could get that offense from him, they would gladly deal with a few defensive miscues. I'm old enough to remember when they had Mariano Duncan making, 50 errors a year, and then they replaced him with Jose Alfreman, who somehow was even worse. And then Hanley Ramirez, the Dodgers did fine with Hanley Ramirez. They've shown that they're willing to sacrifice some defense for offense. Even Corey Seager wasn't a great defensive shortstop, but he could hit the snot out of the ball, so he kept playing. And so I think Gavin Lux could be, I don't think he's going to be the hitter that Corey Seager is, but I think he's could kind of fit that mold. A better defender than Seager, not as good a hitter, but overall kind of similar player.
Well, you broke my heart that you just didn't even mention Alfredo Griffin.
Well,
Between Mariano Duncan and Jose Awfulman, whatever you want to say, you had Alfredo Griffin, who batted 190 something, but was the starting shortstop for the 1988 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers.
although he missed a big chunk of the season because he got hit in the hand by a fastball from which pitcher?
Was it Tom Browning?
No, Dwight Gooden. Gooden
Okay.
fastball hit Alfredo Griffin, broke his hand, and he missed a couple months middle of the season. So Dave Anderson got a huge chunk of starts for that World Series champion team, but Alfredo Griffin was back by the postseason. And as you mentioned, he was not a very good hitter. It's crazy the Dodgers won that World Series despite getting nothing from A's acquisitions, Mike Davis and Alfredo Griffin. And Griffin played like 18 years in the majors and had a combined total WAR of like 2. So that's why I forgot him.
Before we totally trash Mike Davis, remember he got the walk and got on
And the
base to
stolen
set up
base.
the Kirk Gibson home run, and hit a home run in the clinching game, and against I believe Storm Davis in the clinching game. He hit, if I'm not mistaken, I'm doing this by memory. I believe he hit 2 regular season home runs and 1 World Series home run. If I'm not mistaken, Mickey Hatcher, I'm doing this by memory, but Mickey Hatcher and Mike Davis combined for 3 regular season home runs and 3 World Series home runs.
Mike Davis had 2 homers in the regular season and the 1 in the postseason. And yeah, I know Mickey Hatcher had, I think it was 1 home run in the regular season and 2 in the postseason.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's my memory. I remember that 88 World Series vividly. I think Dave Anderson was on that roster. I think he was kind of like a utility in, like, he and Hamilton were like the there was they kind of like, I think Hamilton, not Hamilton, Dave Anderson was a reserve on that team, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and if you ask my mom, Dave Anderson was just there for eye candy.
Well, I also think for the decoy purposes, and again, I'm doing this partially from memory.
He was in the on-deck circle, yep.
Gibson, he was on the on-deck circle when Mike Davis was up, not Kirk Gibson, and Dave Anderson was on deck. At the last minute, Lasorda called back Dave Anderson, and in came, and that's when Kirk Gibson came up, and Vin Scully very famously said, "Look who's coming up."
Sack's wetting on deck, but the game right now is
I
at
know.
the plate.
High drive to right
Nope.
field.
High,
High
come on,
fly
Sully.
ball
High
to
fly ball
right
into
go
right
to right
field. She
field.
is
She is
gone.
gone.
In a year that
And
has
let's see,
been so
and it's so
improbable, the
improbable. The
impossible has
impossible
happened.
has happened.
Yeah. I
And
imagine with this internet
the
lag
only
that
question,
we're not doing this very well in unison.
I know, but we're it's pretty. The only question was could he make it around the base paths unassisted?
Yeah,
There you go.
I've watched that inning more times than I care to admit. My kids know if they're not ready to go to bed, they can just say, "Hey, Dad, can we watch 1980? Can we watch Kirk Gibson's homer again?" And they know that
It's
they're going
really
to get to stay up for at least another 10 or 15 minutes.
it's really one of the most remarkable things that has ever happened. And by the way, one of the other remarkable things, it has two of the greatest calls in World Series history because the Vin Scully's call is phenomenal, but Jack Buck's was, "I
I
don't
don't
believe what
believe
I
what
just
I just
saw.
saw. I
I
don't
don't
believe what
believe
I
what
just
I
saw.
just saw. Is
Yeah,
this really happening?"
yeah.
And he's Jack Buck alongside the great Bill White
I just have a hard
announcing.
time with Jack Buck calls because they remind me of Ozzie Smith. Go crazy, folks. Go
That's true.
crazy.
Now,
That
here's
makes
the
me sad.
deal, and I want someone to find this out. I need someone to find this. I've never heard the LA Dodger radio call of it, nor the Oakland A's radio call of it. It would probably be what probably Monty Moore would have been calling for the A's. And I don't know who the radio announcers for Los Angeles were. Was it was it Rick Monday? I don't know. Was it
I don't remember because I mean it was mostly Vin Scully back then,
but
because
Vin
he would do
Scully
the
did the national
simulcast.
he did the national
Yeah,
television
yeah.
announcement.
So I don't
So
know who was doing the radio for the Dodgers for that game, actually.
uh, all right, well there you go. Well,
Yeah.
heaven forbid we stick to the current Dodger team. We always have
Hey,
to bring
a
it
couple
back.
old guys like us, you know.
Yeah, I know. Well, look at before we go on here, I do want to just bring up this very important message from NHTSA. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, even your parents can tell. Everyone can tell. So what makes you think a law enforcement officer doesn't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. The bottom line is this: if you feel different, you'll drive differently. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high and get a DUI. This has been paid for by NHTSA. All right, we're here with Jeff Snider of Locked On Dodgers. Now, I'm sure you're tired of the whole sort of Bobby Cox Braves like narrative of they're always winning the division, they're always winning 100 games, but they've only won one World Series. This year, I really, excuse me, this year stunned me. I really thought this year, I mean, going into it, and especially when they won the first game against the Padres, I remember thinking, this team's just going to steamroll. And the Goose showed up, and next thing the Padres of all team eliminated. I could almost understand the Braves because the way the Braves played down the stretch, it didn't make any sense, and of course it put a really bad, I imagine, put a bad taste in your mouth of what was, from all other accounts, an absolutely magical regular season for LA.
Yeah, yeah. It's been 2 months now, so I can talk about it without crying. First, I have to say though, that Goose thing. When the Goose was on the field, the Dodgers were rallying. It wasn't until it was the Padres were bringing in a new pitcher and they took the Goose off the field, and that's when the Dodgers got out. And so I don't understand why the Padres claim that Goose as their rallying thing, because the Dodgers were the ones that succeeded with the Goose there. And so, whatever it is, obviously superstition is silly, but
Yeah.
that series was ridiculous because the Dodgers were historically bad with runners in scoring position. They had a stretch of 0 for 20 with runners in scoring position during that series. And this is a team that was one of the best teams in baseball with runners in scoring position throughout the year. And if the Dodgers had gone 4 for 20 with runners in scoring position instead of 0 for 20, 4 for 20 is still not good. If they had gone 4 for 20, they would have swept that series. Because all the games were close. It was Will Smith, his sacrifice fly that he hit to put the Dodgers up 3-0 in game 4. If that thing's 20 feet to the right or the left, it's a 3-run double. The Dodgers win that game. And then the Padres would be pitching. I think I was scheduled to pitch game 5 for the Padres if it had gotten there. Like the Dodgers win the series if Will Smith's laser isn't right at Jurickson Profar. So many stupid little things had to go just right for that series. And I know it sounds like sour grapes, and it is. The Padres were a very good team, and we all knew that. And when the Padres traded for Juan Soto, even though Soto struggled with the Nats and didn't do much better with the Padres, he's still Juan Soto. And so we knew anytime he's in the batter's box, he can do something. And he did.
Remember, he struggled with the Nats because he was alone. He would only see like 2 hittable pitches every single damn game.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you got to take some of his stats he had with Washington for the first half of the season with a little bit of a grain of salt, because that team was garbage. Why the hell would anyone throw him a strike?
Yeah. But yeah, when you look at, it's frustrating that the Dodgers had a historically great regular season and lost in the division series. It's probably a little more frustrating because they lost to the Padres than if they had lost to somebody else. But really, I don't like it when the Dodgers lose in the postseason ever. I do think I think this has exposed some people who weren't willing to say out loud and still aren't willing to say it out loud, but they say things like, oh, but they could never win in the postseason for and it was just 2 years ago they won the World Series. I think it's exposed a lot of people who, for some reason, still think of the 2020 World Series as illegitimate. Some people will say it out loud. I at least can respect those people's willingness to be stupid out loud. But the 2020 postseason, the Dodgers are the only team that's ever had to win 13 games to win a World Series.
Yeah.
And did it all while living in a hotel under quarantine, And so, the season was shorter. The postseason was longer. And the Dodgers were going to make the postseason. The question, it's not like the Marlins snuck into the freaking Astros snuck into the postseason that year. The Dodgers, they didn't sneak in. They had the best record in baseball. They were going to win it. So but I think there are people who, with 2 straight losses, losing to the Braves in 2021 and the Padres in 2022, I think people are just kind of saying, oh, they could never win the World Series. They always lose all we have is this asterisk. Bill Plaschke for the LA Times said it. All we have is this 2020 thing that looks more and more dubious by the moment. Shut up, Plaschke, you moron. It was a great World Series win, and it was perfect. And the fact is, the best team in baseball doesn't always win the World Series. In our lifetimes, Sully, I say our lifetimes, I think it would have to be a pretty broad range for you and me to check the same age range box on a survey. But, let's say in my lifetime, I'm 45 years old. I would guess maybe 10, 12 times the best team in baseball actually won the World Series. That's the way it's set up. And basically, since they went to divisional play in 1969, that's how it's been set up. It's getting further and further away from the idea of let's reward the best team. Back in the day, it was the winner of the National League, winner of the American League. They play each other. Chances are, worst case scenario, one of the 2 best teams won it, and now there's 12 teams in the postseason now. And so the chances of the best team winning the World Series go down and down. And for me, that's why I've told you this 1,000 times. For me, a lot of the enjoyment I get from baseball is the 6 months of the regular season. I had a lot of fun in 2022 watching the Dodgers win 111 games, watching them dominate opponents, watching them over and over just pound people in submission. And yeah, there was always that nagging thing of, well, I hope they can keep this up in the postseason. Turns out they couldn't. But I still enjoyed the season. And the fact that the last week of the season sucked and that the season ended 3 weeks earlier than I wanted it to doesn't change the fact that was a 6 months that was really, really fun to watch as a baseball fan. And I think as a baseball fan, if you can't appreciate the regular season, I don't think you actually like baseball. You're a person, I have a lot of friends who say, I don't watch baseball until October. I say, that's fine. if that's your version of fandom. But if you're an actual baseball fan and you can't appreciate a team that won 111 games in the regular season, I'm not going to say you're a worse fan than me, but you're definitely a different fan than me.
Well, it's like saying I'm just going to watch the fight at the end of Rocky and not watch the movie that builds up to the fight. I think
Which
that,
Rocky? Which one are we
well, you
talking about?
pick a Rocky, but especially the first three Rockies. Um, to me, I've said this before. I'll say it again. People on listen are going to be sick of me saying this. A baseball team does not owe a fan base a championship. A baseball team owes a fan base a summer to get attached to a team, to be with the team day in and day out. The postseason is great. It's fun. Obviously, you want to see your team win a title, and I think I'm assuming the Dodgers will eventually win another title. We'll see, but but what they owe you is an entertaining summer, being there day in and day out, and certainly the Dodgers have done that for their fans. I know that the fans would love to see another parade, but they certainly, remember where they were 10 years ago. The first year, I mean, or like 11 years ago, when, the McCourts were, treating it like an ATM, and there's the nasty divorces,
Yep.
and they couldn't sign big players. There's the big fight in the parking lot, putting that Giants fan in a coma. Remember, there was a period of time where the Dodgers were on the verge of bankruptcy. And I've thought about this a lot, that there was a moment that could have really changed the trajectory for the Dodgers at that point, which was they still had Torrey as their manager. They were still good enough to make the playoffs. In fact, they made the NLCS back-to-back years. But CC Sabathia was a free agent, and he was a California kid who wanted to stay in the NL. There's a little Venn diagram of a team that he could have fit in well. And he signed with the Yankees because the Yankees backed up the Brinks truck. But the Dodgers were not a team that made acquisitions at the point because the McCourts didn't have the money to do, because they were broke, or they were scam artists. If they had the money of the Dodgers, you could have had Sabathia and Kershaw as a 1-2 punch in their prime in the late 90s, early 2000, the late 2000s, early 2010s, and Dodgers win a World Series somewhere along the line.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably true. And yeah, it's we keep talking about these Boston imports to LA. The courts may be the worst ones of all of them. But yeah, it's
And Manny.
Manny was great until he wasn't.
Well, I may have used this analogy with you, but I remember Manny with Cleveland, and I remember Manny vividly with when he was with Boston. He was my favorite player. He and Pedro are my two favorite players on the team. I said that he is Manny Ramirez, and his time in LA was like a condensed version of the experience of rooting for him in Cleveland and in Boston, which is I've equated rooting for Manny Ramirez like a trip to Las Vegas. That when it starts, it's so much fun. You can't believe how much fun you're having. You think, oh my God, this is the most fun I've had in a long time. And then a couple things happen. They're like, oh, okay, it's still fun, right? It's getting a little weird, but it's still kind of fun. And then you get to the point where like, oh man, we got to get out of here. This is getting out of control. And then it ends. And when it ends, you think, oh, thank God that's over. But then you look over your friends and go, but it was fun, wasn't it? That was pretty fun. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we're alive. I'm glad we had to get out of here. We had to stop it, but it was fun while it lasted. And you had that over the 8 years he was in Boston, where he went from being just putting up like mind-boggling numbers, World Series MVP, and by the end it's like, yeah, you have to go. And the same thing happened in Los Angeles, where it was when he arrived, it was Manny Wood hitting more homers you could imagine, and I was already living in Pasadena, and I was like, okay, it's fun that Manny's here and everything, but then the same thing happens. And it's like that moment at any Vegas strip. You go like, yeah, it's time to go.
Do you remember Manny's last appearance as a Dodger?
Was it in the playoffs of
No,
2000? No, I
it
don't.
was
I do.
mid-season. They were playing in Colorado, and they sent him up as a pinch hitter. It was bases loaded, two runners on, some, and they were down like 9-4, but sent him up there trying to get them back in the game.
In
He takes
course, that
strike
mean yeah,
one,
yeah.
turns around, argues with the umpire, gets himself ejected, got DFA'd later that night. His last appearance as a Dodger was getting ejected after they sent him up as a pinch hitter in a key spot.
Was Torrey still the manager that year, or
Yeah. Yeah, because
yeah?
Mattingly didn't take over till 2011,
So that
I
was
think.
2000. That was 2010. Was Torrey's last year, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Manny
Uh,
was
uh,
something special. But you mentioned parades, and going back to what we're theoretically supposed to be talking about here today. Uh, I think the fact that the Dodgers didn't get to have a parade after the 2020 World Series, I think perceptions would be different if they'd had a parade, but they couldn't because it was a pandemic and all. And so the fact is, the Dodgers still haven't had a championship parade since 1988. They won a World Series, but they haven't had a parade. And so I think the next one, assuming everything goes according to plan in 2023, we're not in a pandemic, we can have a parade, or at least not in the throes of a pandemic. Have the parade. I think that'll make people feel a lot better. Two World Series in 4 years, got your parade. That will clear some things up. But the fact is, Sully, it's not after the Dodgers lost, there are people calling for change. Dave Roberts needs to be fired. They need to change the roster. This obviously isn't working, you know. But the fact is, baseball's the same sport in the postseason. It's a little bit harder because the pitchers are a little bit better, the hitters are a little bit better, but it's still the same sport. You win games by scoring more runs than your opponent. And it's impossible to be a team that's good enough to win 111 games and not be good enough to win in the postseason. The fact that the Dodgers didn't win in the postseason this year doesn't mean they couldn't win in the postseason this year. They just didn't. And that's the beautiful, stupid, ugly, beautiful truth of baseball is that only one team wins the World Series every year. And that doesn't make 29 other teams a failure. Doesn't mean that Andrew Friedman doesn't know how to, that Billy Bean, my stuff doesn't work in the postseason. That it's not the case. The fact is, the Dodgers put together a great team that didn't get the job done. It wasn't Dave Roberts' fault. Sure, maybe there were things, there were a couple moves I disagreed with, but it wasn't his fault. It was the fact that they couldn't hit with runners in scoring position. And, that happens sometimes. Sometimes you go through a slump. And when it happens in October against the team in your division that wants to be your rival, it sucks and it gets people calling for change. But I'm very, very glad that the Dodgers front office doesn't believe in change for change's sake, because I think your best chance to win the 2023 World Series is to go out and win another 111 games in the regular season because you have a great team, and then do it in the postseason. And maybe they'll actually be in better shape next year because the Padres and Giants are both going for it. And so, the fact is, the Dodgers, before the NLDS started, the Dodgers hadn't played a meaningful game in like 2.5 months. They had clinched the division literally a month earlier, and they were so far ahead. Basically, the All-Star break. By the All-Star break, they were already, I think, 12 games ahead of the Padres at the All-Star break. So it's like they hadn't been playing for anything. And so maybe it'll be better if they actually have to fight for it a little bit, so that by the time they start the postseason, they've only had a week or two of meaningless games instead of several months. I don't know. These are all just theories, but the fact is, they had a very good team that could have won in the postseason. They just didn't.
Yeah. Well, you want? I think you make a great point. The best chance they have to get back is keep on winning, doing what you're doing. Take your shot again. Well, I'm going to take my shot every time I have you on the show. Jeff Snider, tell people where they can follow your wonderful show.
Yeah, it's Locked On Dodgers, just like this one, where every weekday morning you find us on YouTube, wherever you find podcasts. And I'm over on Twitter at Snydog. If you want to, all I do is talk about the Dodgers, basically. Sometimes I talk about my kids, but mostly the Dodgers, And yeah, that's about it for me.
Well, thank you for making Locked On MLB your first listen every day. For your second listen, we'll have that be Locked On Dodgers. But your third listen, have it be Locked On Sports Today. The biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's Take of the Day. Locked On Sports Today available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Talking about the Dodgers, past and present, with Jeff Snider of Locked On Dodgers. This has been Locked On MLB. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.